at some level we get fixated with numbers. The numbers are not as important as the quality behind the numbers. You can reach 3.2, whatever you want as your target, but if what you've done is put a lot of stuff off balance sheet, it becomes problematic. This is something the CAG has pointed to in past budgets. And again, I want to emphasize the normal level of postponement of off-balance sheet is okay. But if it becomes extraordinary, then effectively you haven't reached anywhere near your target. So I think a lot depends on how the quality is perceived.
You believe the data of the fiscal deficit number this year, at the end of this financial year, is 3.5%. Should we believe it?
Again, believe it given what? I mean, is there fudging? Somebody used the word fudget, one of the experts that I was reading about. We always have fudgets. Now,
this is going to be the headline of this interview, isn't it?
Well, we always have had. Let me not say that this government
qualified,
we've always had. The question is to what extent?
Yeah.
And that's really what is key here. And again, I want to emphasize what we need is something which, does what is normal, but doesn't go beyond that. Government intervention in agriculture has been sporadic and often distortionary. And what we need to do is rethink this whole process. Now, it is not the case that other countries don't intervene, but are there more effective ways of intervening? Clearly, government has to do more on technology dissemination and so on. We've opened a number of institutions which aren't performing according to what they were supposed to do in terms of agricultural technology extension. We need to relook at all of that. But also all these subsidies and distortions and government procurement which happens, doesn't happen, so on, can we replace it by something which is more market friendly? Do we have to support crop by crop, or can we just offer some kind of a blankets one-time sort of, not one-time, but blanket subsidy? Okay, if you own land, we will pay you X number of rupees every year that you own land. Or if we need to think about the tenant farmers also. If you're a tenant farmer, who does the benefit go to? Now, these are things that some states have looked at, Orissa, Telangana. Explore what they did, see what worked, what didn't work, what fixes need to be made. But don't add this as yet another mechanism on top of the existing mechanisms. Try and do away with existing mechanisms. It has to be, this replaces the distortions because previous interventions aren't working well. On the positive side, inflation, headline inflation has come below where most people expected it to be, obviously a result of fairly low food price growth. But countering that, core inflation has picked up. Now, when we set the inflation target, our view was that we didn't want to fudge by taking an easier target. We wanted the harder target, and that at that time was headline inflation. Now, the view, of course, is that core inflation, if it is high, will eventually feed into headlines. So somebody who's looking at headline will look also at core and try and understand why core is high. But this is a technical discussion. Broadly speaking, I think there are still concerns about whether we've killed the inflation beast fully. We've come a long way. We've come a long way, but with core at 5.6, 5.7, it is saying something about whether we are at the limits of capacity, whether we can afford to stimulate significantly more without seeing higher inflation.
So in the layman version of this, does this mean that you'd expect this to be a year of moderating rates?
I don't know.
Do the inflation numbers set us up?
I would say that the inflation numbers are still sort of uncertain. Okay. It's not that, if you'd asked me 3 or 4 months ago with inflation coming down, it looked like there was room building. Of course, that was a period of fair amount of uncertainty about the development of the global interest rate environment. So you want to be a little careful there. Now there's a sense that the Fed is stepping back a little bit. But what is something that I'm sure the RBI will pay attention to is what is happening on the core numbers, and do we understand why core is picking up more strongly? And is this an augury for the future, or can we dismiss it and say no worries? The government determines through legislation what the objectives of the institution are. Given those marching orders, the institution has to determine how it achieves those goals. If it's financial stability, how it determines NPA norms, for example. If it is monetary policy, what rate it sets interest rates at. Now, over time, we've had an understanding about independence of the RBI, and I would say that the RBI, from that perspective, has historically been given a fair amount of independence. I think going forward, we really need to think whether this independence needs to be enshrined a little more in statute. Whether we need an act which protects the term of the governor, protects the rank of the governor, for example. Because the temptation, I mean, there are so many levers that the government has, which if it wants to exercise, and again, governments have been fairly careful about this process, if it wants to exercise, basically imply that the institution has no ability to make independent decisions. The country needs that. And that's why I think we need to re-examine whether, in fact, there is a need for enshrining this in the statutes. I think a beneficial legacy of this government would be for that last budget to be a responsible one, to be one which doesn't saddle the next government with significant legacy, because already, some, as is typical, some expenditures are postponed, are off balance sheet and so on. But if this becomes more than the normal, then the next government has to deal with it, maybe the same government again, but it creates problems for the future. So I would say broadly responsible budget, because after all, there's not that much spending even that you can do in the short run that will create political support. So really maybe outline a path for further reforms if necessary in the budget, but allow the next government, again with the possibility it may be the current government, to figure out how to take it forward. Almost surely way up on the agenda has to be, how do we create more jobs? As you said, very strong growth, 7.5% growth, but it doesn't feel like the jobs are being created to take people out of agriculture. We haven't seen the kind of departures from agriculture that typically happen with China at this level of development. So how do we do that? How do we improve the quality of livelihoods in agriculture and in rural areas, but also allow the transition to semi-rural industry, create more jobs there? How do we create more semi-skilled jobs which are reasonable and offer good livelihoods and allow the possibility of transitioning to better jobs? So these, I think, would be front and center for any new government. And part of that process is, how do you get more growth in areas like infrastructure, which can create the possibility for unskilled jobs, but also create more jobs in manufacturing and in value-added services.